chair this year's International Women's Day event. For those of you who don't know, the theme that has been set internationally for this year is Choose to Challenge. And the aim of this is for everyone, every woman, every man, to choose to challenge gender bias and sex inequalities in our society. And from that challenge should come change. There still is inequality, unfortunately, in our society when it comes to differences between men and women. There are inequalities in health, in access to healthcare, in opportunities for employment and promotion, in income levels. As I'm sure you all know, there is a persistent gender pay gap, in political participation, especially at the local level, but also in our national parliament. And unfortunately, these inequalities in society often lead to harm to women. They can lead to increased risk for women of acts of violence by men against women. This takes many forms. It can be violence by a family member, through sexual harassment, abuse by authority figures, trafficking for purposes of prostitution, things like child marriages, and dowry-related violence and so-called honour killings. These are things that we see both in this country and also around the world. Through necessity, for decades, a critical part of promoting gender equality between the sexes, has been a key focus on violence prevention. And we will be touching on this today. We'll be touching on all these issues and beyond these long-standing issues. Another thing we'll be focusing on this evening is the importance of looking through a gender-based lens when we examine what the impact of COVID-19 has been on society. Has it had an unequal effect on women? I think we will see this evening that it has in some circumstances, in some cases. Women's contribution to the economy, to healthcare, health and social care, and particularly through unpaid care, often goes unacknowledged and under the radar. So today we're going to hear from our speakers about the things we need to choose to challenge. It's about increasing our visibility whilst challenging gender inequality and making that move towards better equality. So our first speaker is Celia Golden, who's the Head of Equality and Human Rights for the Council, and she's going to talk about the impact of COVID-19 on women. Over to you, Celia.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to speak on the impact of COVID-19 on women. I just want to say a little bit, before I talk to the slides, I just want to talk to the fact that we all know that COVID-19 has gone beyond a health crisis to becoming a serious economic crisis. We also know that it's not a leveler that it was claimed to be, that it has compounded pre-existing inequalities, and that there has been an exponential adverse impact for those already on low pay, those working in at-risk jobs, and for women who are doing unpaid care. So there's been an emerging evidence on Black, Asian and minority ethnic and young and older people of the impact of COVID. But I think what has been less well publicised is the impact on women. And yet our contribution has been at the forefront during this pandemic. We've exercised leadership in our family lives, in the economy, in the home, in healthcare, in social care. And we've been central to the efforts to build back better. So we do need to recognise and acknowledge women, that we women are a driving force, and anything where we kind of marginalize our roles or don't really have a sense of it, we would be complicit in making that role less visible. So today I want to say a little bit about the scale of our contribution so that we actually ourselves are well informed about our contribution. So the first slide then, Tim, thank you. So I wanted to identify what is the actual disproportionate impact of COVID-19. So Councillor Dunn touched upon a lot of the long-standing inequalities that we experience as women, but more than that, I wanted to put a lens using COVID-19 about what really is happening in the community and, you know, generally for women. So to begin with, I did find sourcing data has been a real challenge. And that's interesting because, you know, in some ways I'm just keep seeing a lot of people in the lobby and it's blocking off my screen. So, right, okay. So there's been a paucity of data at local authority level. So we're dependent on national data sets. So where you can find the data that I'm going to be speaking to, you will find it in if you just type in women in budget group for the research and the actual analysis. So there's been some very interesting pieces of work by Professor Tracy Warren, University of Nottingham, and Professor Claire Lynette, University of Warwick, and the Women's Budget Group, who've all done a lot of work around understanding the different women, how women from working class backgrounds are responding in real time to the pressures as compared to women in middle class backgrounds are responding. So, you know, that's been a first in terms of identifying, well, what is the difference? Because we all see ourselves universally as one group, but at the same time, some women have experienced much greater hardships. So there's two reports. There's Understanding Society COVID-19 UK survey, which explored to what extent the experience of working class women differs from middle class women and from men. So thanks, Tim, for the next slide. So I'm going to share some data with you just to get the sense of scale of the impact. So what do we know? We do know that 77% of healthcare workers are women, and as are 83% of social care workforce. And as we all know, they've been at the forefront of this pandemic. They've been working. They've been holding this economy up. So women are the majority of workers with the highest exposure to COVID-19 because of the scale and the numbers that are in these sectors. And of the 3,200,000 workers in high-risk roles, 77% are women. Young women are also disproportionately likely to work in the sectors that have been hit hardest by the lockdown. So we're looking at about 36% of young women and 25% of young men working in sectors that have closed down, including restaurants, shops, leisure facilities, travel and tourism. Women are also more likely to be in low-paid and insecure employment. 69% of low-paid earners are women. 74% of those in part-time employment are women, and 54% of those on 0 hours contracts are women. So the majority of people living in poverty are in female-headed households, are also, more likely to be lone parents. So we've got something like 90% of whom are women living in poverty, of those who are single parents and lone parents. So you can see quite a stark picture of what's emerging during the pandemic and how the pandemic has made worse the economic situation of women in terms of poverty. It's just kind of reinforced that poverty. Next slide, please, Tim. So working class women are disproportionately furloughed compared to men and other middle class women. Almost half of the working class women, that's about 43%, did no hours of work in April, compared to just 20% of women in professional or managerial roles. So in terms of working full-time hours in April, less than half of all women in work, about 43%, were working full-time hours, whilst 58% of men were still in full-time work. So the research also showed that working class women are at high risk of redundancy as the furlough scheme is rolled back. Thanks, Tim. So furloughing women on the minimum wage or just above 2/3 of the current earnings is likely to mean more poverty, greater poverty. Women also caring for children and relatives. So with the added stress of worrying about contracting coronavirus or how that household will cope with the loss of 20% of their salary due to furloughing. So they were also suffering mental health stress as a consequence of this level of burden of sense of responsibility and duty to keep the family income going. So you've got 80% of working class women worked outside of the home. Only 9% of working class women said they were working from inside the home. So again, huge stark differences between working class women and professional and managerial class or middle class women, because majority of the working class women are outside working. And 44% of women in professional classes said they always worked from home in June. So this is a picture of a survey undertaken in June. Thanks, Tim. So pre-COVID-19 women were more likely to struggle with debt and bills. 39% of women and 34% of men reported it was a struggle to keep up with the bills, some or most of the time. So on average, women carry out 60% more unpaid work than men. This means they earn less, own less, and are more likely to be living in poverty. So women are more likely to experience domestic and sexual violence and abuse. 20% of women and 4% of women have suffered sexual assaults. More than 1 in 4 women will experience domestic abuse during their lifetime, amplified now by the impact of COVID-19 and having to spend their life at home. Women are the majority, 67% of people living in homelessness, with single parents making up 2/3 of homeless families with children. So across all classes, more women than men reported feeling psychological distress. And in April, 41% of working class women were experiencing distress, the highest proportion across all classes. Thanks, Tim. So in conclusion then, across every sphere from health to the economy, security to social protection, the impact of COVID-19 is exacerbated for women and girls simply by virtue of their sex and as they are generally earning less, saving less and holding insecure jobs or living close to poverty. So unpaid care work has increased with children being out of school, heightened care needs of older persons and overwhelmed health services. So as the COVID-19 pandemic has deepened the economic social stress coupled with restricted movement and social isolation measures, gender-based violence also increased exponentially. Many women, and we're going to hear about that later, many women are being forced to lock down at home with their abusers at the same time. Next slide, please. So current social protection systems are not wide enough. Many women, I'm talking about the government's protection schemes, many women will not have access as safety nets frequently depend on formal participation in the labour force. So if you're working 0 hours contracts, it's very difficult to be able to respond to Rishi Sunak's, offers of grants and all sorts, really. It doesn't really cover this group of people. So because they're not in the formal, they don't participate in formal labour market, and a lot of it, the formal labour market is actually inaccessible. All of these impacts are further amplified with institutional capacity and services being limited. So, there isn't a lot out there by way of help. If the aim is to build back better, then there's an urgent need to take action to protect the employment and incomes of working class women. Women will be the hardest hit by this pandemic, but they're also the backbone of recovery in communities. Every policy response that recognises this will be the more impactful for it. And I'm very conscious that a lot of our finance grants and business grants are all doesn't really have a gender lens at all. And that's true across the piece. We never hear what the impact is, and very few organisations focusing on looking at what is the impact, and should our policies now begin to have a greater assessment based on gender, and it's kind of very hidden, very invisible, the impact assessments for in terms of gender. Thanks, Tim. The next slide. That's it. So happy to take any questions after the next few speakers, who are also going to touch on some of the big challenges facing, residents in the borough. Thanks, Chair.
Celia, thank you very much for that. That really painted quite a stark picture of the impact of COVID-19 on women. We're going to hear now from some women who have been involved in working with the communities throughout this pandemic. And first we have, well, I'm going to introduce the people we're going to have. So we've got Aldona Zavica Thornton, who is the chair of the Hounslow Parent and Carers Forum, who's going to give us an insight into the impact of the pandemic and isolation from the point of view of a carer. And then we have Jackie Duke and Harpreet Sekon, who are going to talk to us about the challenges that isolated women have faced. Jackie is the Domestic and Sexual Violence Delivery Manager here at the Council, and Harpreet is the Learning to Respect Programme Coordinator. So without further ado, I'll ask, I think Aldona is going to come in first. Aldona, you need to.
Sorry, I pressed it. I'm sorry, I don't have any slides or anything, so I'm afraid you might have to just watch me for about 10 minutes. Yes, I run Hounslow Parent Carers Forum. I've been doing the job for 8 years. Again, unpaid. I did get paid a little bit by the council this last year, but generally I'm not paid for the job. To do with parents, obviously, because I deal with parents, and about them feeling isolated, ringing up parents and talking to them and seeing what's happening in their lives. I think one of the most difficult things is, I mean, this does involve men and women, is when they're a lone parent and they're dealing with children on their own. And with this pandemic, they are, they have no adult to talk to. And I think this to me really struck. It was just very strong with most of the conversations that I had with people. It was just having another adult to talk to. So that is one thing that I think is, a real major issue during the pandemic. I mean, I would like to have spoken, and I probably will, a little bit about isolation generally, but obviously, it all goes back to the we're generally concentrating on the pandemic. Also parents trying to access services in the council and other services have been very difficult during the pandemic, because it's been very difficult to get through to people. This tends to have been quite a big problem. Also trying to get the right equipment to do with medical equipment tends to have been a big problem, because obviously a lot of our parents have children with severe disabilities or medical problems, and they need an ongoing supply of medical equipment. Another big problem, again, this is possibly for the parents whose children are more severe, is having the respite care, is having carers come in and stay overnight, or carers to help during the day or whatever. But a lot of the parents obviously are extremely worried about where that person has been before and who they've contacted, and they have a child who's very severely disabled, and you know, and has maybe quite a complex you know, array of medical needs, and so they are so worried that if somebody has been with somebody who's, you know, who has had COVID, or been sat next, you know, on a bus or something, or at the supermarket, that they could bring that to that child, and you know, compromise their health. So this is another huge thing. So quite a lot of these parents have had to refuse the normal respite care that they would normally get. I think one of the biggest things I hear from parents, and also I listen to the radio a lot, is the lack of human touch, the lack of having a hug from someone. And I think probably a lot of us have felt this, that when we're missing our you know, our families and friends, the fact that we haven't got somebody to just give us a hug every now and then. So that really does matter. Going on to the case of domestic violence, this was something that we did a survey about last year to do with domestic violence, but it wasn't about the partner, it was also about the children. Well, the survey we did was about the children, and how many children have been attacking their parents. Now, we started doing this actually before the pandemic, and I personally, and I think quite a lot of other people, were really quite shocked at how high it was, the amount of children that attack their parents. Parents don't like to talk about it. I think there's some sort of stigma, or they feel ashamed. But we started noticing a couple of parents who came in with bruises or you know, maybe scratches or whatever, and we thought we'd do a survey about it, and it was we got a huge amount of people. It's probably on average about 4 or 5 times the amount of people we would normally get who answered the survey. And even afterwards, people said, oh, I wish I'd done the survey. So there was still more. So domestic violence isn't only from a partner, it is also from children as young as 5, which is quite a worry. Talking about domestic violence, I was in a relationship which was with a gentleman who, well, no, I can't call him a gentleman, but with a man who was very violent towards me. So I was able to understand how isolated you feel. Before, I didn't understand it. I always thought, why do these women stay with men like this? What is wrong with them? Until you're in a relationship like that, and then you understand, you really do understand that you always think you can change them. You always think you can do something to make them see what they're doing is wrong. Sadly, it's not as easy as that, and generally, you know, a leopard won't change its spots. But I think it was only when he kicked my dog that I then did something about it. And I think this is, again, a very typical women or woman's thing, where you don't so much care about yourself, but whoever you're caring for, if somebody hurts them, that's only when you'll do something to then look after yourself. Also, I used to work in a playgroup for 13 years, and also half the children there were being abused by their parents. we knew about this. It was a special social services play group, and I was thinking about their isolation and about building up their confidence in themselves. I was always asked for the older ones to do this like stranger danger game, an amount of children who thought that a stranger was always a man who wore dark clothes and looked grumpy. And that was a children's idea of what a stranger was, and not really realizing the concept of how vulnerable they were. It's made me think about this. It's made me think about domestic violence and the holistic view of it. And I think it's all about getting children ready for this world. And I don't feel we do that enough. And I would really like to, if anybody's interested in helping me, I would really be interested in getting some sort of project together where we speak to parents, to teach parents how to speak to their children, so that children are very aware, without being frightened, of themselves and confident of themselves. And so that so that parent knows how to talk to a child and says to them from a very early age, your body is yours, you have to look after it, and you know it's only for you and not for anybody else to look at or touch. And I think there needs to be more of these conversations. And also, you know, it's general protection, because also obviously when they get, it's not just for little ones, obviously when they get to be teenagers, and it's not just about their body, it's also about grooming to do with you know, like terrorist groups and things like that. It's grooming altogether, and it's about feeling confident in themselves to know when things aren't right, and also to know they have someone to go to. I think it's really important for parents, and I am saying that as parents as opposed to just women, to be able to talk to their children and say to them, and this is obviously because, you know, a lot of our carers are single carers as well, to be able to talk to their children and say to them, no matter what happens in life, I'm always there for you. Never feel as if you're on your own and isolated. I think there definitely needs to be a lot more happening in communities about parents talking to their children to set them up for life, really. What else was I going to say? Right, okay. Sorry, I've lost my thing here. Yeah, the other thing, yes, what was that? Sorry, I've got notes here. Right, okay. Right, to do with COVID and that, I also think it's really important that we also remember that even though obviously all this has happened, that we also understand that it's also brought out the best in a lot of people as well, that there's been people who have just gone out of their way to help other people. And I think this shows very much in the community. And, you know, in Hounslow, I've heard of so many good stories. So I think that this is probably a good place to finish this. So, but I also, yes, the other thing I was going to say was, if anybody knows of anybody who is single or on, you know, on their own, either living on their own or as a carer, who, because some carers you know, are looking after their husband or wife who has dementia, and so they don't have anybody to have a good conversation with. If we can all take time to think of somebody that we can ring, or you know, possibly sooner, you know, in a very short while, be able to pop round to and make sure that they're all right. Because I think that is something that would really help in the community if we all look after one another. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Aldona. And I will ask Jackie and Harpreet to come in.
Harpreet? Okay. Yeah, hi everybody.
I kept myself on mute. Oh, sorry, Jackie.
No, that's okay. You go ahead, Harpreet.
I started talking and had myself on mute. So thank you ever so much, everyone, for inviting myself and Jackie along. We're part of the community safety team. So my name's Harpreet Sekon. I'm the Learning to Respect coordinator. I'm really touched by what I've been hearing so far. And Eldona, I really hear what you're saying about children and young people and you know, that talk about healthy relationships. And I will say something briefly about my programme that speaks, or the Learning to Respect programme, excuse me, that speaks to that. But I just wanted to sort of, just for a moment, draw the picture out, really in talking about Hounslow's commitment to ending violence against women and girls. And just in case people don't know, that the London Borough of Hounslow has really had a focus on violence against women and girls and trying to understand how we can look at this in terms of ending violence against women and girls. So there is, the London Borough of Hounslow does have a plan, which is Violence Against Women and Girls plan, which was signed off 2019, runs to 2022, I believe. And the mission and the commitment really of that plan was to ending violence against women and girls within our locality, and to see a continuous improvement on early intervention services and prevention, so that fewer victims reach that crisis point. I understand now that we're in these extraordinary times of COVID-19, and I just wanted to say that our team has been incredibly responsive to that and has moved the things that we do to respond and understand that we do have women that are going to be facing very serious their avenues of being able to get that help being restricted because of this lockdown. Jackie is going to speak a bit more to that. If I may, I'll just want to say something about the Learning to Respect programme, which has been running in Hounslow for a number of years. It is essentially a programme that looks to prevent domestic violence and abuse by looking to educate our children and young people about healthy relationships. And that runs through from nursery right through to Key Stage 4 age appropriately. So Aldona, I do know that there's been work that's been done in schools around the NSPCC campaigns, around the PANTS campaigns. So certainly if you go to a Hounslow school, and I would say the vast majority of schools, I can only think of one or two perhaps new schools that haven't had the Learning to Respect training, there will be some input into talking about healthy relationships, and we're constantly working with schools to try and support them in what they're doing with our children and young people. So that is a real commitment that Hounslow has as part of one of the things that it does to look to prevent domestic abuse and violence by educating our children and young people about healthy relationships. I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to really cut it short and say that's me for the moment. I'll be happy to take questions a little bit later, but I'm going to hand over to my colleague Jacqueline Duke. Thank you.
Thank you, Harpreet. So yeah, good evening everybody. My name is Jacqueline Duke and I'm the Service Delivery Manager for Hounslow Domestic and Sexual Violence Outreach Service. So we are an in-house service for the London Borough of Hounslow. My service responds to the need of the residents in Hounslow in regards to all sorts of org. We work with domestic abuse, sexual abuse, honour-based violence, forced marriage, modern day slavery, sexual exploitation, and so on and so forth. As Harpreet said, you know, what we've heard so far is very sad, some of it, but also very inspiring, some of it. And I just think it is about recognising actually the strength of women in the workplace, in the homes, and those that are working very, very hard to end domestic abuse. I just wanted to bring to the fore, my service works with anyone that's experiencing any form of domestic abuse. Lots of people will look at a domestic abuse situation and recognise if it's physical violence, they'll recognise if it's sexual violence. What I just want to bring to the fore of what's happened through COVID, we have seen a huge increase in not only the dangerousness of the physical harm, but we've also seen an increase in economical deprivation. We've had so many referrals coming through now where once upon a time they probably would have never have needed any financial assistance, but we have more and more and more that we've had to refer on to food banks, we've had to be applying for grants, we've been working with housing so that they can get some assistance with rent. All of that pressure adds to the psychological welfare of that person that we're working with. And when we look at psychological trauma that has been perpetrated through abusive behaviours, outside of COVID, it's bad. It taps into somebody's self-esteem, it restricts what they're able to do, it stops them from moving forward in their lives. What we found through COVID is there's no escape from it. You don't get anything outside of that psychological abuse and trauma that's happening within the home. So what we found is where someone might seek support on that given day, it's taken longer for them to seek that support because they're not feeling that they've got the ability to do that. That said, we've seen an absolute escalation in referrals. So just as an example, in February 2020, for the whole month, we had, how many was it? 44 referrals that came into the service. February this year, which was pre-lockdown, it escalated right up to 122. We had people contacting us fearful of what was going to happen should they then be locked down. Since lockdown started, first time, second time, it's continued in that vein. Referrals coming in are very, very, very high. We've had referrals from people that are not even sure if they're experiencing domestic abuse. This is perhaps something that they've lived with for a very, very long time, but they might go out to work, or they take the children to school, or they go around to see friends and family, or they go out shopping, and they have some sort of freedom. And then what they found is actually when they can't do that, they have been experiencing domestic abuse for a very long time, but just hasn't necessarily addressed that. So we've had people coming in not knowing if they're at risk. And it's been given us the opportunity to explain what domestic abuse is. We, just to answer some of the queries that people have asked, we also are currently providing a service that goes into our schools. So there is work being done with young people and children and the non-abusing parents on how they can support their children. So that piece of work has been going on for a couple of years now. It is coming to an end, but that has been going on for a couple of years, and we've also been doing work with schools alongside Harpreet and her programme around how schools can respond more effectively to disclosures of domestic abuse or concerns around a child that may be at risk of harm. When we first went into lockdown, we've had to adapt our service delivery to support that, and I'm very proud of what Hounslow have managed to do. We quickly rallied together, the whole of the council rallied together, and we came up with a plan on how we're going to go forward. How can we reach out to residents in Hounslow, you know, those that used to come to our one-stop shop, you know, if they were going out on a Wednesday morning, that wasn't there anymore. So how could we ensure that every opportunity was given to those that were in lockdown? And I think, you know, from my service point of view, and with the assistance of the London Borough of Hounslow, we've responded very, very well. One thing I just wanted to point out, and it's not a particularly pleasant note, in the first, as we all know, on average 2 women per week are murdered by a partner or someone that they've been in an intimate relationship with. This is in England and Wales. In the first 3 weeks of lockdown, there were 11 women, 1 man and 2 children killed in those first 3 weeks. So it was a massive increase. What that told us going forward was that COVID was also being used as a form of domestic abuse. What was happening was victims were being told, you cannot leave the property, you will spread the disease, you will get arrested for leaving the house. And so we had situations where people thought that they were not allowed to leave. Thankfully, that myth was dispelled, and the message was sent out that if you are experiencing domestic abuse, you can leave your home, you can walk away, you can go to the nearest police station, and you will be given support. So I'm not sure what the numbers are now, but I'd like to think that that is reduced. Still too high, I appreciate that, but that first 3 weeks was quite shocking. We're still open for business. We are still being contacted. We have a telephone line that people can call. Our work at the moment is online, but as soon as the restrictions lift, we will continue with our group work and delivering the one-stop shop. Thank you. That's me. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much to all our speakers in that section. So we do have 10 minutes in which we can take questions of any of our speakers so far. Also, just because we're having some bandwidth issues, if people who are not speaking could turn their cameras off. Obviously, if you want to ask a question, then unmute yourself and turn your camera on. But if yeah, just if people could turn their cameras off while they're not speaking, that should hopefully give us all a better experience. But I will take questions now. So if anyone wants to put up their electronic hand, or if you're not sure how to do that, maybe just unmute yourself and speak up. Okay, so I've got a hand up from Mukesh Malhotra. Mukesh, please unmute yourself. Turn your camera on if you wish to.
Okay, can you see me and hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I put some comments in the chat box. One of the things I wanted to highlight that which was brought up by a couple of the panel, and I just wanted their thoughts around it. What we've found as a credit union, i.e. Thames Bank, is that we've seen an increase of 25 to 30% increase in applications for child benefit accounts.
Mukesh, you've managed to mute yourself somehow, or someone.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Something's happened. Anyhow, I was going to say that we've seen an increase of 25 to 30% applications for child benefit allowances, child benefit accounts, where parents can, whether it's male or female, they're putting their money into a separate account so that they can save and towards school expenses or other expenses, but it keeps the money away from the abusive partner. And I don't know whether the members of the panel have been aware of the fact that there's been some financial issues where people have, their money's being taken away from them by their partners. And this was a way we found through the national body that people were using credit unions to help rather than going to loan sharks or people of that nondescript, say, type of horrible people. Just a thought and a question to the panel on whether they're aware of that or not.
Okay, I think, Jackie, are you going to come in?
Yes, I can respond in a way that I can. I would agree the financial abuse that we are being told about has increased with the people that are accessing my service. Now, that is because in general, the income coming into the families has reduced, not necessarily if you're on benefits, but because there's no escape, there is no other way of earning any extra finances. We have women coming to us who have never ever experienced being hungry or their children being hungry before, but because financially their benefits are being taken from them, or they're being put into the perpetrator's account, or their salary is going into the perpetrator's account. You know, that does happen, and it is something that, you know, we work with our clients to try and change. So, for instance, if there's benefits going into a perpetrator's account and that's incorrect and it should be going into the victim's account, we'll work with DWP to get that changed, etc., etc. So there is support out there for people that are experiencing financial abuse, and there are things that you can do about it. But it's through COVID, there has definitely been an increase in victims' money being taken to be used for whatever else it's being used for. They're experiencing not being able to last, you know, the week, and so therefore having to access, as I said before, us applying on their behalf for some grants or attending food banks. I hope that adds to your question. Thank you.
Thank you. And Aldo is going to come in as well, I think.
Hi. Yes, I was just going to say, yeah, I am aware of this, and I was particularly thinking of a particular case a few years ago, where the father was keeping all the money, even though the mother was looking after the children, and having to literally beg the father for money for food and money for clothes, etc. But she was never given any money for to be able to do what she liked with, really. So yes, we are very aware that this does happen. The problem was that when they did this couple did split, that that she had hidden the only way she could keep money from him that she could see at the time was to send it abroad. But then that obviously caused problems for when she tried to get universal credit for herself. So it is, you know, it is very difficult that you know, trying to speak to you know, trying to recognise these parents and be able to speak to them, to let them know what is the best thing to do about the money, because obviously unless they tell us about the violence or the you know, the financial control, then it's very difficult to get across to parents what they can do with their money.
Thank you very much. I think we're going to move on now to the next section, because we've got a lot lined up for you this evening. And we've got so many things open. Right. Our next speaker is Natalie Sexton, who is a coach at Harlequins Rugby Club. She's going to talk to us about women in sport. And Natalie was a service user and then an employee at Hounslow Action on Youth. And then she moved on to Harlequins and did an apprentice. I'm hoping I've got all this right. She'll tell me if it's wrong. But what you can tell is she's a very impressive woman. And I'm really looking forward to what she's got to say to us. So, Natalie, over to you.
Yeah, you got it all right.
Phew.
Yeah, hi, I'm Natalie. So growing up in Hounslow was very different. There wasn't many services around. Half the time we was on the street messing around. And then of course you'd get into trouble because you're messing around on the street. There wasn't many services at all, not that I can recall. There was a lot of crime that was going on in the area at the time, and there still is to this day. All the time you just see police cars going up and down, up and down, up and down, and you just think, what's going on? And as a young person, that was scary to see the gangs going around and people running up and down, screaming and shouting. As a young person at age 10, that's very scary. and then you didn't know what was going to happen from one day to the next. You know, it was all different, and happening from going to everything being all right from one day, and the next thing everything kicking off, and you see police, ambulance, and all sorts happening about. At the time, all I can remember is when the only thing that was about was the Hamworth Centre. I remember going there from when I was really, really young, in preschool to be exact. And I remember going all the way through, being in the preschool, then going over to the youth club side and joining Fun Zone, which was a group aged 7 to 11. You know, and I used to play football, I used to DJ, cook. And then as I got a bit older, there was another like a youth club. There was for the older lot, which was aged 11 to 18. Then I started going there, and started attending, playing sport. And then I turned 16, and I started volunteering on Fun Zone. I loved it, you know, helping the kids and in the situation that we were with all the crime and that was going about. And then as I was then I actually got employed by Hay as just a youth worker for Fun Zone. Sadly, Fun Zone shut down, so I started working on Youth Bonds, which is a program still running to this day. I learnt so much for the whole time that I was working on Fun Zone up until Youth Bonds. I learnt so much. I built my confidence, and I started delivering sessions to the young people, physical health, fitness sessions, and I just grew as a person from then. And ever since then, you know, if it wasn't probably for the Hamworth Centre, I probably don't know where I'd be to today. So from a young age, all I'd done was play sport. Even in primary, I was playing sport. I would run around trying to get involved in everything, playing loads of different sport. And sport that I loved the most was football, rugby, netball, and rounders. I mean, I enjoyed all sports, but that they was my main ones that I would go to. It was actually quite a funny story. I was playing for my old primary school, and they said to me, "Oh, you're really good," as well as there was a couple of others on the team. "You're really, really good." I was like, "Okay, thanks." And bearing in mind, I was about 6, 7, and he said, "Come and join the boys' team." There was me and 2 other girls joined the boys' team, and I think ever since then we just grew and grew and grew. And you know, the sport, it wasn't just me that got moved onto the boys' team. There was quite a few of us that actually went on, and you know, we won loads of tournaments, as well as playing all the sport that we wanted in the time. And then what I do at Harlequins, so I run an educational program for 16 to 18-year-olds who aren't in education or employment. HITS provides learners with all opportunities to gain key qualifications in English and maths, as well as a BTEC in sport and active leisure. HITS uses the core value of rugby skills alongside other sport and different opportunities to increase young people's resilience, self-confidence, and long-term employment. So it leads on to my next point. So how, when I was 17, so I was just still working on Youth Bonds, I was 17, I was actually on the HITS program. So I actually went through their program. And I was at a point in my life where I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was just working on Youth Bonds in the evening, and I was just stuck. I had the whole day, and I didn't know what else I wanted to do. When I left school, I had no qualifications. I was naughty, didn't have no qualifications. But I knew I wanted to do something else. I couldn't just sit around and do nothing, as I was a very active person. And during that time, I was struggling with my mental health due to a family problem that happened. So I went down to Harlequins, and they sort of said, "Oh, we've got this program." It was actually through a connections worker in Hounslow that actually gave me the details for the course. So I got in touch, went down to the stadium, where I started attending the course. And Matt, my tutor at the time, was talking me through it and how I could get to where I wanted to. They helped me a lot through how I was feeling, but also developing my skills as well as my English and my maths and my BTEC. And then I'd done so well on that BTEC course that they actually offered me an apprenticeship, just as doing a level 2 in school sport. So it's sort of similar to what I was doing already, but it was just a higher degree. And while I was doing my apprenticeship, I became a rugby coach. So I actually qualified for my level 2 in rugby. So I went out and delivering, whilst I was in my apprenticeship, I was also delivering rugby to primary and secondary school kids, which then leads me on because I, after my apprenticeship finished, that was for a year, I stayed on with the Harlequins Foundation, and I was just like a general coach, so I was doing admin and I was going into schools and delivering rugby to young people that didn't have the opportunity, and I would run after school clubs as well. And then back in November, actually, just recently, they offered me this job role, the HITS officer, which is actually running the HITS program. The program that I was just talking about, they actually offered me the role, which I then took on, and which I'm currently still in the role now. So it's made me go from not wanting to do anything to having everything, and where at the stage in my life where I wanted to be. If it wasn't, and I also was on I'd done a positive story for BBC London. I was actually on there a couple of weeks ago. They just wanted a positive story in the area, and it came down to the Harlequins Foundation, seeing the progress that I made while I was there. So generally, if it wasn't for the foundation, the Harlequins Foundation, I probably wouldn't be where I am today. How sport helped my mental health? It's helped it massively. You know, getting out and kicking a ball, it can, as I'm football crazy, it's different. You know, it gives you that sense of pride in going out and building your confidence. You know, mixing with your team. And you're not so focusing on your negative all the time. You're just focusing on that game. And it can boost your mood, like playing as a team. Don't just help your mental health, it helps your physical health as well, by keeping active. But unfortunately, due to the current circumstances of the virus and everything that's happened, I haven't actually played any sport. And I go in the garden, kick a ball about now and again, but it's not the same as playing in a team. I am actually hopefully thinking about joining a football team once we're allowed to. I think that will be better for, as well as being part of a team. And advice I would give to women, if they want to join, go and do it. Sport takes you to another world. It's not the same, it sort of takes you away from reality. And it just takes you to a different world. So if you want to join, go down to your local team, your local clubs, local rugby clubs, football clubs, whatever's in the area, just go and do it. If it's something that you're passionate about and something that you love, I would really suggest you go down and just give it a go, even if you're struggling. Like me, I was struggling, but I still went out and gave it a go. Yeah, that's me. Thank you.
Fantastic, Natalie. Thank you so much. I mean, that was just really brilliant to hear about your story there. And it sounds to me like that being involved in sport and the other activities through Hey, and then going on to actually coach other women and other young women and girls and getting them involved has been really good for both you and the other women that you've worked with. So thank you so much. That was really inspiring, and I hope that the other young people on the call today will really you know, take away something from that, because it's really nice to hear.
Thank you.
Okay, right. Our next speaker, actually what we're going to hear from now is several more young women who've also been involved with Hey, Hounslow Action on Youth. I will introduce them properly now. So Hey have been working with young women during the pandemic on creative writing. The writing that you're going to hear this evening was produced during the lockdown, and Hey partnered with Apple to deliver writing workshops in last summer 2020, to try and capture those feelings of lockdown and other important events like the Black Lives Matter movement. So we're going to hear now from a few readings from these young women. These will be published in the next book from Hey, which is called Monuments. And the four women we're going to hear from are Florida, Bilkis, Aziza, and Hasna. So over to you.
Hi guys, can you see me?
Yes.
You can? Okay, great. Cool. Let me just, yeah, there we go. All right, cool. All right, cool. So the first poem I'm reading is called Half of You. Only half of you is in one place. The rest remains in that desert without water. Those nights and days at sea, inside the stomach of a red-hot truck. Those unfamiliar miles you traveled are more than a journey, of a voracious appetite for things. Wouldn't you run if you were chased? Wouldn't you seek refuge if your home was invaded? Why didn't you cry for help when you were drowning? Were you trying to tell us that you're no different from anyone else seeking a home? Half of you, half of you, half of you. Can you hear me? Can you hear us? Can you hear them? Yeah, that's me. Done. I think it's Bilkis next.
Hello.
Hello, Bilkis.
The poem I'm gonna say today is called Spirit. I am more than metal frames and the cushions at my back. My wheelchair does not define me. You see a girl rolling along. My creamy, freckly skin confuses you. I'm both white and black. My brain expands each day, knowledge rushing through billions of neurons. You have eyes to see, but not to stare. You have lips to speak, but not to whisper. Yeah. I'm finished.
Thank you, Bilkis. That was lovely. I think we have Aziza next.
Yes, good evening. My poem is called Underfoot. Underfoot, like a tea tree, there to bear fruit, absorb air. I am not one of those who cannot wear jeans or go out. We can change the world to a place where self-esteem is not like fruit crushed underfoot. Thank you. Hasna?
Hi. Sorry if my connection cuts me out. Okay. My poem's called Not Open for. Sorry, is my connection cutting out?
I think it's okay, Hasna. Do you want to try?
Okay. Yeah, I'll try. My poem's called Not Open for Discussion. A grey area. Thinnest line. My hijab and heart, deflecting prejudgment. We are reoccurring cells, generating sequences. Not books, nor pain. I hope you were able to hear that.
Thanks, Hasna. We did lose little bits of it, which is a shame. But we're all going to look forward to.
Were you able to hear?
We heard most of it, I think, but it did cut out part way through for me. If you want to give it another go, we have got time. I'm not sure it's working. Okay, we'll have to leave that. But thank you very much, Hasna. And I think we're going to round off with another reading from Florida.
Can you guys hear and see me?
Yes.
You can hear me?
Yeah.
Sorry, my camera just keeps moving. Right now. Would you be able to mute? I can't. Yeah?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay, cool. So this next poem, I pretty much written it because I was raised by 3 different women who had different expectations of me, and I kind of chosen to challenge them. And it's called Oh Wait a Minute. Oh wait a minute. Eat your food in such a way that it will not turn someone else's stomach. I walk in like a lady, not the tomboy you are. Be bulletproof. Do not look too young, but do not look too old. Do not be too friendly, but be approachable. Do not love too hard, but love enough, so you will not be alone in the long run. Oh, wait a minute. I adapt, I reflect, I adjust, I mold. Shouldn't this be enough? Be independent, but not so independent that they will leave you. Speak the truth, but not too much truth, just the right amount after calculating who they are. Work hard, but not too hard, so you do not forget your family. Without you, they are nothing. Make sure you cook, clean, and set the table right. Make sure you dress and act accordingly, so you do not embarrass us. Oh, wait a minute. I adapt, I reflect, I adjust, I mold. Shouldn't this be enough? Hold on, my child, we are not done. Do not curse, but discipline with harsh tone. Do not let the child speak unless spoken to. Do not let your imagination run wild, because that's not you. Do not dream big, because that's not you. Oh, wait a minute. I adapt, I reflect, I adjust, I mold. Shouldn't this be enough? Oh, wait a minute. I know in my heart I'm winning. I'm on a mission. Praying on my knees, I cast down my burdens. I choose to believe in healing. I am made to be great. I won't stop till it's done. So I will be who I'm meant to be without meeting your expectations of me. So it is enough. Yeah, that's me.
Fantastic, thank you. And yes, applause for all of you, virtual or real. No, that was fantastic. All of those were fantastic, and that was really a really powerful note to end on. Thank you, Florida, and all of the other young women so much. Okay, how are we getting on now? Yes. So our next speaker is Jo Robertson, who hopefully is here. So Jo is a learning and OD partner, a business partner here at the council. That's learning and organisational development. And Jo's been very active in setting up the Women's Equality Network for the female staff here in Hounslow. Staff have been very active over this last year, setting up different groups and networks. And I had the pleasure of speaking at the launch event for the network on Monday, International Women's Day. And it really was a fantastic event. So thank you so much, Joe, for inviting me and the other speakers. I really thought it was a very positive event, also one that captured, you know, some of the things that women felt needed to be improved. So I'm really looking forward to seeing the outcomes of that. And Joe is now going to speak to us about the activities of that and about equality, women's equality in the workplace more generally.
Thank you so much. What I wanted to do was really, I think that's why I was invited, was really just to talk about the Women's Equality Network in Hounslow. And I suppose really what we want to do is showcase the work we're doing and demonstrate that, you know, we're also making attempts to get our own house in order, as it were, so that we can say that we have looked at the issues within our own organisation and how we are as an employer. And I guess I'm here in a way with sort of two hats on. I'm here as a woman in my own workplace who's interested in these issues, and I'm learning such a lot, and this event is just another occasion for me to feel really part of something. And I think the poems particularly, I found that really quite something. So all of these events and all of these occasions are ways for us to really understand from a personal point of view what it means to really be a woman today, and the issues that all of us are sharing, and the issues that are unique to some of us. But the other hat is also who I am in the organisation and what my role might be to try and determine some of this direction, and what we can do with some of the findings from the group and how we can make the organisation better. And I think that's really key and important. And I don't know who's organising all of this, but it might be Tim. Is it all right if I share some slides of my own? I'm not going to ruin anything, am I? Is that okay?
Feel free. I will stop sharing myself, and
okay.
if you say your own one's listening.
Thank you so much. Sorry. Thank you. So bear with me. It's always a nerve-wracking moment, this, when sharing slides, but hopefully it'll be okay. They're not particularly fancy, they're just for me because I need to have something in my little prop. Okay. So I think they're being loaded now. I can see something happening. There. How do I get that into presentation? Is that presentation view for you guys? Can you see that as a proper presentation? Because I can just see it as a...
I can see it here, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So, all right. So what I'm going to really do, just explain sort of what we're trying to achieve in Hounslow and the issues that so far we've already sort of uncovered with some of the preliminary work we've done. And hopefully where we're going, the direction we're hoping to go in. So the first slide is a quite a nostalgic picture of Hounslow House. None of us have been there for a whole year. I don't even know if it might have green stuff growing all over it by now, who knows, but it's that's where we were, and that's hopefully where we'll be going back to in some fashion in sometime later on in the year. But obviously in the thick of things, obviously we've talked a lot about COVID, but there was also another huge issue in the middle of last summer, which was obviously precipitated by an event in America, and then we had the Black Lives Matter movement here, and it kind of, everybody was looking very hard at sort of what we were doing as, internally, as what we were doing as an organisation, and how we were representing some of these views and circumstances. And the BAME group was set up, and other groups within the Equality Forum. So we've now got all of our groups established, which is the BAME group, disabilities group, the LGBTQ plus group, and our women's group was sort of started to be formed in the autumn. And there's a steering group now that was formed to primarily, a few of us set up the steering group to arrange and organise the launch of the event. And what we're really looking to do is to have to really understand what are the issues within the organisation, and all the issues that people have talked about today are obviously shared by people who work in an organisation such as ours, which is big, has people working lots and lots of different roles within the organisation. And so that's what we're really trying to do now, is to eke out of the organisation where we can go back to the organisation and challenge some of the things that are happening, uncover them and expose them and deal with them in a meaningful way that will establish us as what the big ambition would be, the kind of the real sort of what we might call a stretch goal is, to make us at the vanguard of leading, as a really, really good equalities employer, and in that sense be a very attractive place potentially for people to come to work. So the next slide is, so what is it that we want to do? And this isn't an exhaustive list, this isn't it, but obviously we've looked at what are the things that would be good in a group like this, and clearly it would be raising awareness of the issues that are important to the women, the community in the organisation. And a very important part of it is holding the organisation to account. It's, there quite quickly we've uncovered some really interesting, and when I say interesting, some issues within the organisation, and it's important that there's a voice there that can take these issues forward. Promoting women as leaders is one thing, but this isn't all about the glass ceiling. It's also about providing a support network for people who need somewhere and to talk, and making sure that place is a safe place. So it's having that environment in which people can talk about the issues that are important to them, and showcasing our achievements as women in the organisation, making sure that wherever we are, whoever we are in the organisation, that we can promote what we've done and what we've achieved, and we're going to do quite a lot about that, particularly for our younger members of the organisation as well, who often need a lot of support to sort of get on in the organisation. So this is where I was sort of, in a way, about the sort of second hat, the bit that I'm looking at in how we might approach some of the stuff we're doing differently, to make sure that it incorporates what the kind of work that needs to be done to move some of the challenges forward and sort some of these issues out. We really need to look at our policies. We need to look at the wording of our policies, how our policies impact on women in the workplace, the opportunities and the barriers that some of these policies, what they cause with women in the workplace. We've also got to look at our management style. This is something that we're doing as an organisation in terms of our culture. We're attempting to improve our culture through a new set of shared values and a new specific approach to the way in which we encourage people to look at their own progress and development in the organisation. So with that in mind, it's important that we can use what we call a coaching approach and make sure that the language within that, and also this was an issue that came out of our launch meeting, actually, which was there's a concern amongst a lot of women about confidence, and we did call it in the meeting imposter syndrome, but there was a bit of pushback about whether that was a term we really want to use. But it's I think for a lot of people understand what we mean by that. But overall, it means about improving and acknowledging that assertiveness has its place, and it isn't something that only men can have. And it isn't something that is off-putting if women have it. And these are all the kind of bits that we're starting to really start to gather together, this momentum of, that we need to really establish the way in which we can be and how we all behave in the workplace. We need to be better allies in the workplace. So there are some stories that people have told today and that people are talking about in our launch event. And we need to consider others in the workplace who might be the subjects of those kind of stories. And we need to not just think about women in the workplace. As I said earlier, it's not just a glass ceiling issue. It isn't all about people getting to the top of the organisation, but it's about us all supporting each other wherever we are in the organisation. And we need to continue with our resources and support that we put in place with a mind of, again, this is something that's raised today about the impact of COVID and how it disproportionately impacts on women, and where we can do much more to support how women are coping with working remotely. We know that some of the burden has been lifted by children going back to school as an example, but for us as a council, we're not expected to go back to work in any meaningful way really for quite some time, and that we're really going to be relooking and reshaping the way that we do come together in the building that you saw at the first slide, but it won't be the same as before. So there is going to be a shift to women potentially being at home much more, and it won't necessarily all be over for us as an organisation. It will all have changed. So we need to reflect particularly on some of the things that were said today in the earlier talks, and think about what could be the impact of that. So this is something we're a lot of this now is all input. There's not a lot of that output yet because we're a very new group, but this is where our thinking is at the moment. And a big part of this is this sort of where we started actually in a way, but things have grown. But just understanding the full life experience of women in the workplace. If we want to seriously consider how women can achieve, we've got to consider all the different stages. As somebody of my age, I will have gone through, being a young person in the workplace, being somebody who had children and then came back part-time, and then wanting to sort of, restart, re-energize my career at a slightly later age, and then re-establish myself. And now possibly in the next few years thinking about maybe going back again to, maybe it could well be I go back to sort of shorter hours, fewer days in the week, and then eventually retirement. So this is the life experience of one person, but all those stages might be shared for many of us. And as an employer, we need to understand that it's still the same person, and that just because at one stage I have a family or at another stage I may wish to be part-time, I'm not different. I'm not a different person. And there's some really interesting anecdotal stuff that had come out of some of the forming groups about those kind of experiences, and these have been really interesting, and those issues are something that are starting to form exactly what we're going to take forward in terms of our challenge. So our survey hasn't closed yet, so I can't talk too much about the actual findings because there were some preliminary findings, but it would be wrong to sort of put them out there just now. But what we did get a sense of at the point at which we just did a quick snapshot was there were incidences documented of everyday sexism, so the kind of the glib remarks or the sort of slightly putting down of what you might call mild discrimination. Some people called it banter. Maternity and parenthood issues, a little along the lines I was talking about before. Pay and grading, there was some question about a pay gap. Actually at Hounslow, we don't have a massive pay gap, but there is a pay gap, and there are roles that we need to look at in terms of how the remuneration for those roles, and there are other things we need to be thinking about, not just the gap, but how we reward people in certain roles and what we do with them in terms of career opportunities as well. But quite a big thing was really that 80% of the respondents so far wanted us to promote a workplace culture where women could thrive. So for everyone, that's something different, and that's what's so good about that statement. But I think it's really where the key bit is where we want to be as an organisation, is encouraging, enabling and empowering so that women can be the best they want to be in the workplace. And this is my last slide, really. What we've learned from this is that I can't see the text on this. It's so small. I'm so sorry. Let me just go into it. Can I make this bigger? So it says here that we are basically learning from all of the partners that we've worked with. We learn by just listening to others. We've learned from the launch event where we had not only internal speakers but external speakers, and today has been another example of that, where we're learning all the time, and I'll take away from this some of the things I've heard, and we'll add that to the mix. And we're obviously, as a part of the Equality Forum, we know that we can work together with the other groups. There's clearly a lot of shared common themes, and also there's crossover between the groups. So it's important that we're not just working in isolation, but that we're recognizing that we're actually a force all together to make the environment within the organization better. But there's a lot to do. There's an awful lot of stuff that we are questioning. There are a lot of places that we need to still sort of dig a little deeper, and we're really trying to understand, how we can make a difference. But what has been great is that we've got a huge amount of support from the chief executive. So clearly that's, if anyone's going to support what we do, the whole Equality Forum, what we do, then obviously that's great. And one of the speakers was the assistant chief executive, who's our highest woman in the organisation. So there's an awful lot for us to do, but we do want to make a difference. We want to really make the organisation the best it can be. There's a huge culture change. There's a huge lot of work going on in the organisation, and I think this is just a small part of it, but it will be the flavour of where we're going in the future and making us a very different organisation to the one we have been previously. So thank you very much. It was a really nice opportunity to talk to you about what we're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Jo. That was really lovely to hear about. And as I said, having participated in the event, I was certainly full of excitement for what you're going to achieve as a network. And you do have the support of counsellors as well as the senior staff as well. So good luck with it all. So now on to our last speaker of the evening, which is Dr. Annabel Crowe. Oh, and Dr. Julia Chalmers-Watson. I'm reading the slide in front of me. So delighted to welcome you both. And this is part of our, you're going to talk about vaccination and maybe because we know that, women do have some particular questions and perhaps concerns around vaccination, and you're here to help answer and give the lowdown and give people the good advice. So over to you.
Thanks, Catherine. Hello, Julia. Are you able to show yourself as well?
I'm here. Can everybody hear me? Good evening.
We can.
Hi, Julia. Yeah. Hi. So this is going to be a bit of a double act. We are both GPs working in Hounslow and have worked in Hounslow for many years, and we're both intimately involved with the vaccination campaign. So thank you for allowing us to talk about it, because we could actually probably talk about it for hours because it enthuses us so much. I've also really enjoyed all the presentations. I mean, there's been a real mixture of struggle, sadness, but some real joyous and hopeful things. And I mean, Natalie's story was amazing, and I just think you should be talking to all the young people about that. And we could have you at our surgeries talking to all the young troubled people would be brilliant. And the poems, just really touching. But anyway, on to another, which I think is another really joyous topic, and we really see as the light at the end of the tunnel. And I think after a year of just real struggle, it's just been the most wonderful and uplifting thing to do, not least because when we go into the vaccination centres, we get to see people and talk to people, which is wonderful. So we're going to try, I hope it won't be too dry. There are a few facts and figures. But we are going to try and sort of gear it more towards women as well. So Tim, can I have the next slide, please? Okay, so this is just to let people know that you'll probably all know that there's these 9 cohorts of order of prioritisation, and they generally go by age, but also with high risk. And just interesting, I think, to note that a sort of study was done, and they looked at the number of deaths that had been sort of up to autumn last year, and 88% of the deaths were from people, sorry, I can't, I'm obscured now, were from people from the top 4 groups. So that is why we've really concentrated on those groups of people. And once all 9 groups are vaccinated, that will cover the groups from which 99% of the deaths have thought to have come from. Can I have the next slide, please? We will be sending these slides round. So we're in Hounslow, we're giving 2 types of vaccine. There's the Pfizer and the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, and both are safe and have been through rigorous trials like all other drugs. And we're giving them in different ways. We've had roving teams that go round and go to the different care homes and supported housing and learning disability care homes as well. And we're also going to be setting up some more sort of groups that go out to areas which we've not had so much take up of vaccines so far. And then we have the 4 local sites, which are generally based in either health centres and in Felton Assembly Hall. So that's where the majority have been given, and they give about, each give about 500 a day. And then there's also the mass vaccination sites, which are coming on board a lot more now, and will be focusing on younger people as we go forward. To date in Hounslow, we've vaccinated more than 60,000 people. And this is, I think, it's more than a quarter of the population, which is amazing, and mostly in the top 6 groups. And of the vaccines administered, 54.5% have been given to women. And this is quite interesting because I understand that traditionally women are more reluctant to have vaccines generally, which was, I have to say, a bit of a surprise for me. But I think having heard that women are much more likely to be working in as health workers and social care workers, and therefore they make the larger proportion of the groups that have been offered vaccine up to date. So we can have the next slide. This is just I think we're really pleased about this. This is just showing the success we've had in Hounslow and the percentage of people that we to date have vaccinated in the different groups. So as you can see, sort of high 80s and 90s, and we still keep going though, and we've still got work to do with people with underlying health conditions and try and encourage people to come in for vaccination continually. And every single week we are increasing the percentages, which is, I think, is quite incredible really, that we've managed to get 96% of 70 to 74-year-olds. But when you look at the people who are not getting the vaccine, it is a sort of a demonstration of the inverse care law, because the people who are more likely to catch COVID or be adversely or unwell with COVID are people who are not coming forward for the vaccine. So we're working hard with the public health department in the council to really try and target these people, to try and encourage them and talk to them and listen to their concerns to get people to come forward for the vaccine. Have the next slide, please. This is just a map, really, just to show where our sites are. So that the red blobs are where the GPs are giving the vaccine, and the green ones are the the three green clustered there around the pharmacies, and then there is the Brentford Fountain, where we're hoping we're going to move one of our sites there and also combine it with the mass vaccination site. And we also have access to the mass vaccination site at the Stoop, which Natalie probably knows about, and also in the Compass Centre, which is near Heathrow. I think next slide, and I think I'm handing over to Julia now. There you go, Julia.
Thank you for inviting me to talk tonight. Can I introduce myself? My name is Dr. Robertson, and I've actually had the privilege of running the Thornbury site. And one of the silver linings of COVID is that women in general have been encouraged to take up leadership roles. So of those 4 PCN sites, 3 of them are run by women. And it has been a pleasure and privilege to have so many people volunteering. So despite the fact that COVID has adversely affected men, as in men have died more and have been ventilated more, and you have to get to age 85 to have more women dying of it than men, there is some silver lining for this, that women are taking over more responsibility, and we aren't dying of COVID, and we need to remember that as much. I also just say that I still think that vaccinations are really important, because women are more adversely affected, 40, 50-year-old women with long COVID. And long COVID is when you are sick, short of breath, coughing for over 8 weeks. And that has been debilitating, and is really a push for me to ask you to really encourage women to get vaccinated. 1, to stop long COVID, and 2, to stop it being spread around other people. So we discussed earlier that in general term, women are less likely to take up vaccines. And when asked, this is sometimes about pregnancy and breastfeeding. Now, there are 2 vaccines, as we said. We are giving it to 22 million people in the UK. And I can tell you, from the 11,000 people I've given it to in Thornbury, there's 1 woman who's had a really horrible butt rash. I mean, she's been unwell, but that's it. For 11,000 patients, that is pretty good. So I can personally say this is safe, and if you look at the numbers of 22,000 people, it is safe. No studies are done in pregnancy, but we, up to now, initially when you license or put new drugs through studies, they tend to not be done in pregnancy, but we are beginning to do AstraZeneca vaccines in pregnancy, and we are doing it in children. So I hope there will be actual evidence which has been peer reviewed quite shortly. We give the flu vaccine to pregnant women, encourage it, because we know there's an increased risk in pregnancy for flu, and we know there's an increased risk in pregnancy for COVID. And now, recently, we have been calling in everybody who's had gestational diabetes. And this is because people with gestational diabetes don't do well with COVID. So again, I would like everyone who's had gestational diabetes to take up the offer and get the vaccine, because it is safe, you can breastfeed, and you can continue to breastfeed. So women are more likely to be working as social care, either as doctors, nurses, care workers. And that is another group which I'm really keen to encourage to book into. Not all GPs know who their carers are, but anyone who is a carer, so anyone who takes attendance allowance, anyone who's registered carer, we are delighted to vaccinate this weekend. I mean, if you come to Thornbury and you live in Hounslow this weekend, I guarantee I will vaccinate you as you're a carer. And that's any age of person over the age of 18. So if the queue gets too long, it was all my doing from tonight. But carers, I am encouraging. Can I have the next page, Tim? So I am very proud of this COVID vaccine, how well we've done, really. I say 26% of the population. There's 327,000 people, or we're only vaccinating the adults, and we have vaccinated 28% of the over 16s. So bearing in mind there's many more older women and carers, I still think women are slightly underrepresented at any particular age, and I think possibly in certain ethnic groups they're underrepresented, and I would be delighted to hear from you ways that we can encourage uptake in younger women in certain ethnic groups. I'm open to suggestions. So the thing that makes me sad, or one of the things that make me sad, apart from all the actual sickness from COVID, is that there are take-up is affected by ethnicity. And that is what I would love us to address, so we deal with people's concerns so that everyone gets this incredible good technology and takes a vaccine that has relatively few side effects. Next page, please. So what are the benefits of vaccinations? The reason we are giving one vaccine at the moment is because it reduces the chances of going into hospital and getting seriously ill by 80%. So that is brilliant. It also reduces the chance of you spreading it to other people. So the reason that I got my vaccine was so that I didn't give COVID to other people. It also means that I can go and see my mother. My mother told me in October I couldn't go up to Scotland until I had a COVID vaccine. COVID vaccines weren't even really proven in any shape or form. Well, that's quite a high task, mother. But, you know, I can't see my mother until I'm vaccinated. So I hope it will open up life. That is a real reason. It's to protect my other people and yourself, and to stop you getting long COVID. Next slide, please, Tim. Most people leave the vaccination site saying, oh, I didn't even feel that because it's a very small needle, and are fine. There is a minority of people who get headaches. I would say slightly more in AstraZeneca, and they feel as though they've got a little bit of short-acting flu. So they get body ache, headaches, arm pains, temperatures, sore throat, even sometimes sore tummy. But all you need to do is take paracetamol, possibly take it easy for 48 hours, and it goes away. There is no evidence of any long-term side effects of this vaccine. And obviously the advantage is you're protected from COVID. The unknown question is, how long will you be protected from COVID? And obviously that's an unknown, and we might be having to give more vaccines, and we are aware of that. But with the knowledge we've got at the moment, with the viruses that are in circulation, this works. And unfortunately, then another unknown is when we will next need to be vaccinated. Next page, please, Tim. So one concern I've heard is that the Pfizer might affect fertility. This is 0.03 mils of fluid of a protein of mRNA, which is the building block of our codes of our genes. There is no either theoretical reason or proven reason that it affects fertility. But if you have any concerns, then choose to have the AstraZeneca. There are more AstraZeneca vaccines that all the mass vax do, all the Mac vaccines vaccination sites do AstraZeneca, and that is proven technology. It's the virus. They chop a bit out of the virus and then give it to you. So that's the same as having the flu vaccine, just for COVID. So can I just reiterate, there is no evidence that even affect fertility, but if you're concerned, get yourself the AstraZeneca vaccine, which is easier to get. If there's any questions, I am delighted to answer them. Next page, please, Tim. Now, pregnancy. There is all the major organisations, the World Health Organization, the Royal Colleges of Obstetrics and Gynecologies recommend that pregnant women take the vaccine. I would even go to the point of, I would recommend people take the vaccine before they get pregnant, ideally. And as I said earlier, breastfeeding, yes, you can have the vaccine and be breastfeeding. Next slide, please. Now, there is multiple sources of information. I would actually have to say, I think the BBC has done a very good job, as has the London Borough of Hounslow and our other organisations. This is multiple sources that you can look on. You can get in contact with me if there's anything else. I think in some ways we've been over too much information, but if there's any actual questions anybody has, please ask. Do put up your hands using electronic hands. Are there any hands? Oh, there's a hand. Who's got a hand up? No, it's gone down. Tim, do you think there's any hands?
Sorry, Tim. I've got a question. It's Celia.
Celia, what is your question?
Sorry, I'm afraid I'm a bit of a pain. I've got 5 questions, which I might need to, and it may or may not raise. Others may or may not raise it. My first question is: how is it decided who gets the Pfizer and who gets the AstraZeneca? Second question.
Keep going. Yep.
Second question: how are we ensuring that the second jab due in the 12-week period is offered in time? Third question: do you need evidence of being a carer? Because some people are not registered with the GP, are quite informally being carers. Fourth question: do we have any data on 30-year-olds and 40-year-olds and how they're affected by COVID-19, given that the first set of cohorts are now in the more safer, are not being hospitalized? And my final question: what additional adjustments are we offering to blind and disabled residents to get to vaccination sites? Thank you.
That's brilliant. Those are great questions, of which I would love to answer all of them. The Pfizer vaccine, AstraZeneca, is complex. The only absolute indication to have the Pfizer vaccine is if you're young. We are giving Pfizer to 16, 17, 18-year-olds. So that's number one. If you're 16, 17, you need to have the Pfizer. You can't have the AstraZeneca at the moment until the studies come out. The other reality is that Pfizer was available first. So I've had Pfizer, an awful lot of medical professionals have had Pfizer because it was what's available. And once you've started Pfizer, you need to have Pfizer the second time. So availability is probably the largest determinant of which of these two you get. There is, we as Thornbury vaccination site have had no Pfizer in 3 weeks. So, you cannot, the degree of choice is negligible. If there is a good reason, and there are some medical reasons that people on AstraZeneca, on allergies particularly, then we will literally, people will come and will say, well, actually a better idea, you have AstraZeneca, come back next week. So if there's a medical good reason, then we will try our best to get you the vaccine that is sensible, but that it isn't really choice. The second jabs, the question number 2 is the second jabs. This is using a lot of my headspace and organisational time to try and ensure that every single person gets a second jab on time. So the expectation is that everyone will get it between 11 and 12 weeks. We as Thornbury have started a booking system called AccuBooks, which is all electronic, and everyone who's done it, the way that we book vaccines, which is clever because we don't have much time. So I've been told today we're getting vaccine tomorrow. So I've literally today set up clinics for Friday, and this is 400 patients we need to get in for Friday. So the only way that's possible is all electronically, not even people telephoning. So we've used this system called AccuBooks, which means that people get texts, and these texts are unknown numbers. So if that gets spread around, that's quite useful. They aren't forgeries, they aren't fake, they are actually us offering vaccines. And if you've used that system, which means you get a text from the GP surgery, it says, we are going to offer you a vaccine. We then send you a text that says, follow this link and book your vaccine. That system will then call you back again in 11 weeks' time into the appropriate vaccine. So if you had an AstraZeneca first time, they'll invite you for an AstraZeneca second time. You can't or book the second one early, it won't allow you to. The computer says no. So that only for us started, can't remember, second week of February. So it's not everyone. Everyone else, we've obviously got lists, and Ellie, who's organising it from the council, of exactly whom we gave, when we gave it to, and we are being promised deliveries of vaccines, mirror images from those first vaccines. So then we will set up clinics to give the vaccine. Now, we haven't actually set up clinics because we don't know, or personally, I don't know if I'm going to be at Thornbury or at the Fountain Leisure Centre. So it's that sort of level of I don't know, and I don't know what times they will start, and I don't actually know what the delivery schedule is. So to stop having to cancel any appointments, and again, Thornbury hasn't cancelled one appointment, but the downside of not cancelling any appointments is that we've done it very last minute when I know I've got vaccine. So I hope, intend, and actually think it will happen, because every time they say a vaccine, the vaccination will come, it does come. And I mean, it might be, 4 hours after I hoped it was going to come, but it does arrive on the right day. So I hope that we will be delivering it. And please don't phone your GPs. There is umpteen tasks a day, because all I can say is wait until 11 or 12 weeks, at which point you should get it. And if by any chance you don't, at that point, and only at that point, either go to the vaccine site where you got it, or your GP surgery, but please don't contact anybody before 11 or 12 weeks. Okay, the third question is carers. We initially wanted some sort of proof, but actually a self-reported I'm a carer is good enough. Every single adult now needs vaccinated. So if you come and say I'm a carer, I go to your GP and say I'm a carer, I think the general health view is you're a carer. Okay. For 30 to 40-year-olds, the thing about there's lots and lots of studies out there about 30 to 40-year-olds and 50-year-olds for COVID, and the effect of COVID or COVID vaccinations. COVID, the major problem in that younger age group is long COVID. And long COVID is debilitating, in as much as, people can't go for a walk around the block. They're literally limited. So with chest pain and so long COVID, I think, is the major problem. And obviously some people who tend to have other underlying medical conditions, whether that be even as minor as fatty liver or severe obesity, there was can get seriously ill and end up on ITU, and even some die. And I think the obesity issue, I would just like to flag, if you watched the 100,000 deaths on the BBC, I thought it was quite marked that all the young people that were shown who had really tragic stories of death were all distinctly obese. And if that's one call that as a society is that we need to address our inactivity and keep people active and not obese. On the getting people to vaccination sites, we have been trying. The reason why our numbers are going up to 96% is because we've been trying really, really hard to get people in. So we have social prescribers who came into work in the last year who are helping a lot to literally phone people, get people in. Families are helping, social groups are helping, and even taxis are helping. There's been a bus strike last weekend, and the taxis said if people can't get to vaccine sites without them, they'll drive them. So so social prescribers are aware of these things. Society has been brilliant about supporting people to get to vaccine sites. And if there's anybody who literally needs a vaccine and can't get there, sort of give it to me and I will find a way of getting them there. And that's also been several of my housebound patients who literally haven't been out the house and have carers 4 times a day, have had families go in there, hoisted them into wheelchairs and push them around to us. And these people are absolutely housebound and they have still been got to vaccination sites. So again, I think we need to pat ourselves all on the back, and there's been a real community effort to get people here, because we can't get Pfizer to you at all. And AstraZeneca, which we have done quite a lot of home visits, is definitely when we can do it and when we have it, and is very time consuming. So I hope that answered all 5 questions. There are a few more hands. Shall we keep going?
I'm afraid we have gone over time, and some people do have other meetings to get to. So I think we are going to have to wrap it up here. But if people, is there a way for people to contact you?
Of course there is. I mean, I think those are all very useful. If you put them in the chat line, we can, you could actually get a list, and then I will answer them all, and we can put them out with minutes from a meeting or whatever we do afterwards. But I'm very happy, and if anybody wants to stay on to answer, I'm sure Annabelle will be equally happy. People who need to leave, and the people who really want to ask the questions do. Okay, thank you for inviting us.
Okay, thank you very much. I am going to have to go, so I'm going to leave.
Thanks, Councillor Durnart. I will stay. Don't worry, Councillor Durnart. I will carry on staying. Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Everyone.
Yes.
Thank you, and sorry we